Passwords have to go. There will always be a password somewhere. Your network router is going to have a password, but passwords are bad. Like, they are not a good measure anymore. They are crackable. Hardware auth or FIDO in general provide you an opportunity to be ahead of the curve, because AITM is, the last digital defense report I saw, was like 2.5% of attacks.
Welcome to Demystifying Microsoft, a podcast by the Sourcepass Center of Excellence for Microsoft. We believe Microsoft shouldn't be hard. Each week, we break down what's changing across the Microsoft ecosystem, help you solve your toughest challenges, and provide clear, actionable advice to keep you ahead of the curve. If you're responsible for Microsoft decisions and want clarity without complexity, you're in the right place. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Demystifying Microsoft podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Taylor, and today I am joined by my good friend, Dom Kirby. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good, man. Excited to nerd out with you a little bit today, so this should be fun.
Oh, these are the best calls where we just nerd out. I mean,
they're the best. It's so much fun. People can choose whether they want to watch or not. We're going to have our fun and nerd out about stuff regardless. So today we're going to jump into an interesting topic, a very prescient topic, which is FIDO2 and identity security. So let's jump in. Hopefully, everybody knows that MFA is like the most important thing we can be doing to secure identity. I think MFA is, more important than like antivirus used to be back when antivirus was the thing, or firewalls. It's ground zero for the battle to secure tenants, Microsoft 365 tenants, and identity and security. Hopefully, we've gotten to the point where people aren't convinced that they need MFA, although I find a lot of tenants will do assessments that still don't have MFA consistently deployed. But that's a topic for another discussion.
I almost pulled my string on that one.
Yeah, no, I don't need to get you going there. But what I want to talk about today is just, that not all MFA methods are created equal. And I think this was a theoretical conversation 2 or 3 years ago where we're like, well, you probably shouldn't use that. I think it's a very different conversation today. So, Dom, tell us why not every MFA method you can enable in Microsoft 365 is equal.
Well, like anything else in technology, threats evolve. Passwords were great security at a point in history. It was a simple thought. The user knows the secret. Nobody else knows the secret. And that sort of evolved. We dealt with, wait a minute, the admin knows the secret. So we introduced password hashing, and that sort of has grown. And then MFA came on the scene. And MFA came on the scene very quietly, right? Enterprises had their RSA tokens that were multi-million-dollar implementations. And then as time went on, phishing started to become a thing, and was like, wait a minute, passwords are enough. And everyone's password is their dog's name or their kid's birthday or the season or whatever it is. So MFA got introduced. One of the earlier sort of, I'll call them consumer forms of MFA, was a text message or SMS. Well, lo and behold, the entire network is compromised, and it has been for years, and it still is, because we don't know how to evict threat actors. And that's that whole, you can research Salt Typhoon and really understand that SMS is not a secure medium. However, it is better than nothing. If your choice is password only or password in a text message, do the password in the text message. And then, TOTP came out, which is the idea of that it's that 6-digit number on your phone, changes every 30 seconds. That's great. It's hard to keep up with, relies on one-way math, and all of that is great. But threats have continued to evolve and push this. And now what we see is modern adversary-in-the-middle, or AITM attacks. And these AITM attacks work by stealing what your browser needs after you do all the login dancing. Right. So that could be your username, password, SMS, TOTP, whatever you're using. I don't care, because I'm stealing your cookies or your token that the service gives to you after you log in. And that's now what I'm stealing. So hardware authentication, and FIDO2 in particular, was built to battle that, but also to battle the bad password problem in general.
Yeah, it's a good call out. Today we're talking about kind of 2 or 3 separate attack vectors, right? So there's the fact that SMS and email as an MFA method are just not secure. Like you said, the SMS system's been compromised. The T-Mobile gets hacked about once a month. So the ability to go walk into the T-Mobile store and SIM jack somebody is not some theoretical hard to do thing. It's pretty straightforward. So I can steal your SMS. A lot of email MFA relies on people's personal email. So one of your employees' personal email gets hacked and they reset their work account. Now they've got the MFA. I mean, it's not a secure thing. We've seen a lot of the MFA fatigue and bombing over the years, where Like we had a customer where the executive got attacked and they just prompted that executive until they were willing to click yes. And so that's kind of the old school stuff. Or your social engineering attacks where I steal the 6-digit code. I can convince you to give it to me over the phone or in some text message thing. I social engineer you into that. So I think those traditional kind of more boots on the ground kind of attacks are still a thing. And, moving to like the Microsoft Authenticator app with your number matching, it actually solves a bunch of those, right? So for if you're looking at bad, good, and best scenario, the bad is SMS and email MFA, right? A good is the 6-digit rotating code, but even better is like the Microsoft Authenticator with the number matching, that sort of stuff. But where those break down is, okay, you got everybody on Microsoft Authenticator, great. You're not going to be as easy to attack with social engineering attacks. Now we've got these adversary-in-the-middle attacks where they say, well, that's great. You've got secure MFA, but I don't care because I'm going to steal your token and you're actually going to validate my token through a really secure MFA method, right? So talk us through how those man-in-the-middle attacks and maybe even explain to us how you even demo these in, like security boot camps. You can show people this is something that was theoretical 3 years ago, but now it's just child's play to enable.
Yeah, and this is a really old category of attack. And all it means is that I've put something in between you and what you want in order to listen to what's going on. So, traditionally, if you go, we can go way back into like Wi-Fi and then WEP.
Go back to phone lines and like party lines and neighborhood lines
and taps, right? And all of that. But, when we would say your Starbucks Wi-Fi is the most dangerous thing you can be doing and all that, and that's sort of true today, but not nearly as much as it used to be because we have more modern encryption techniques that prevent you from seeing what I'm doing on the network. And we have SSL. Modern AITM is really, it capitalizes on what we call a reverse proxy, which is a super popular tech. It's just a server that serves your content and it sits in between you and sort of whatever on the back end needs to happen. Almost everything you connect to on the internet uses one. And simply take that same technology and I proxy, say Microsoft, and then I get you to click a link. You're going to see a login page that looks, feels, and behaves like the Microsoft login page. In fact, when you put in your email address and your company has branding, your company branding is going to be there all shiny and new. It's going to be exactly what you expect, but you're actually connecting to my server and you have to see it in the address bar in order to get a hold of this. And the beauty of it is you're going to log in and you're going to do your MFA dance. And I've got a couple options, but the most sophisticated one I like is I'm actually going to show you what you're logging into. Outlook's going to pop up. You're going to be reading your emails through my server and maybe not even know it. And what's happening is you log in and you do all the things that have been set up because you've got a great admin and you're a good security human. Once you finish logging in, Microsoft sends you back what we call a token. And that token is a bunch, to you, it looks like gobbledygook that I send back every time I want to do something. That token says, hey, this is Dom. He's logged in. He did his MFA. Let him do his work. I steal that and I copy it and I now use it to do nefarious things. I extract your data. I do a BEC or business email compromise, whatever I'm going to do with that. You're typically none the wiser. It's very easy to pull off, to your point, Nathan. We demonstrate this all the time. I want to be clear, we demonstrate it in approved scenarios with infrastructure we own, but it's a product called EvilGenix, right? And it uses what we call fishlets or fish kits, I believe he calls them. And you plug these in and poof, you're proxying Microsoft. It's a valid SSL certificate because it's using my domain that I control. The best way to spot it, there's a couple of tells pre-compromise. One of them, the biggest one, is the address, the domain in the address bar, right? Read before you click, read before you enter passwords. If your password manager says you're not in the right place, you're not in the right place. But the other tell, there is some stuff, there's some browser extensions now out there and some security products that are looking for those telltale signs too, that, hey, this looks like a Microsoft page, but it's not a Microsoft domain, let me intervene.
It's just literally somebody standing over your shoulder watching you type in your PIN number at the ATM, and they've already got a copy of your credit card number. And so they can be you. They can go up to that ATM and say, hey, I'm Dom. And the ATM says, you validated yourself as Dom and you passed all the tests, right? So, and I think this was something that 3 years ago, people like you were like, hey, look at this can be done. And you show it and demo it in a lab. We weren't seeing it in the wild, but I think about 12, 18 months ago, it became a real thing in the wild. We started to see it a lot in customer scenarios where threat actors were doing it. I thought it was interesting. You said it's a product. That's what's calling out, that I can literally go find somebody on the internet selling me the ability to do with it. They've got the whole kit, like business email compromise, email free or sell it. But I can buy it with a customer, with the email list, with the whole 9 yards. You too can have your own threat actor. You're doing business email compromise and stealing people's accounts. So this is moved from a theoretical space to it's real. I think the other thing that's scary about it is, as admins, we have these ways, whenever we think an account has been compromised, we go dig into the logs. So we go try to find what happened, right? So we log into our Entra portal, we start looking at the audit logs on that account. And with normal email compromise, usually I see the string of moments. 17 failed attempts, and then a successful attempt, or 17 MFA pushes, and on the 18th they clicked yes, or whatever the variables are. The login came from another place. But with this token stealing, it's different because the login, they're all successful. And it looks like, MFA satisfied. There's nothing glaringly wrong. You have to pay attention to subtle details like the IP address that came in, maybe the time of day, or there are some details, some attributes that the backend is starting to be able to pick up on, but they're subtle. And it's not nearly as easy to go investigate.
Well, and attacks like this are where threat hunters and threat hunting platforms earn their keep, right? Because you usually are combining more than one signal to come to a conclusion. So my machine is sitting here on my desk behind an IP. And if I log in and very suddenly there's activity from another place and another IP, like those are the two signals I have to correlate. So I'm correlating something that happened in the cloud and something that happened on my machine. And I have to have the infrastructure in place to see both of those things at the same time, which is hard. But, I think we're getting there, and we're seeing products really be able to catch this both pre and post intrusion.
And it helps when you like let's talk about the Microsoft stack. If you're running Entra ID P2, Plan 2 license, as part of your Defender suite, get that properly configured. Microsoft's decent at connecting these dots. They do even better when you're running the Defender for endpoint on your endpoint, because it's also adding a whole bunch of signals data. And so as you go deeper in the Microsoft ecosystem and you really embrace their stack, they provide a lot of that data. Now, a lot of maybe traditional MSPs aren't running the Plan 2 license. They're not running Defender EDR, so they don't have all those variables. Like you said, there's a couple solutions now for these token attacks then, right? We got a couple ways we can address it. One is to have, I'm just going to call it out. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I'll just mention it. Putting compliant device policies into your tenant where you want trusted, known, validated devices on your connections to sensitive content on your side is one of the quick ways to detect it, because that token replay is not enough when you have that conditional access policy in place. It wants to see the token and the validation from the client that you're a trusted device, and it validates every connection. And so that token doesn't get you through that. So just to call out that's a really great reason to be looking at compliant device policies and compliant device conditional access, known, managed, compliant devices.
Yeah, and that defeats these AITM attacks because typically Microsoft is forcing your browser to interact with the local system. That doesn't happen through this proxy because it's a headless connection. You have to be cautious because there are some apps in the Microsoft ecosystem that just honor a minted token no matter what, and they don't introspect often. Or like if you go to the bar and you show them your ID, there's a difference between they look at it and scan it and check it with the DMV. Some of these apps don't often check it with the DMV. Do be cognizant of that. If you see signs of an incident, you got to revoke sessions, you got to revoke tokens, you've got to do the work.
I think that's a great call out. I think it's a common misconception in incident response at the low level where we're just trying to solve a business email compromise. People go in, they reset the password, and they're like, all right, we're done.
Right.
You can't just stop there these days. You need to go look at what enterprise apps were registered. Is there an OAuth connection that used that? Revoke session tokens, but also revoke authentication methods, because oftentimes they're throwing another authentication method in there. Heck, if they're smart and it's enabled, they put a FIDO2 token in there and they have double a confirmation that they are who they say they are when they're pretending to be you. So you've got to go deeper than we used to go when we were kicking these threat actors out. But let's get on to our main topic here, what we're excited to talk about, which is FIDO2. So tell us what FIDO2 is, Dom.
Yeah, I had to Google it for the show because it's been a while. But in 2013, there's an organization called the FIDO Alliance that was created. And this is an open standards group, which is super common in the tech space, right? W3C is another one of them. And they're basically trying to look at the world of authentication and say, how do we do this better, right? We know that passwords universally suck. They eventually get compromised, or users are really bad at picking good passwords because they can't remember them. And password managers help, but not everyone uses one. They're kind of looking at this holistic issue of authentication, saying, what if we just did this completely differently? And where they landed really summed up in two topics, is hardware and cryptography. And they looked at, the DoD and organizations that are of similar scale will use PKI or certificates, which is similar but more complicated. And they said, how do we take that model and reapply it? So they came up with, first it was FIDO, then it was FIDO2, and now you've got WebAuthn, which is sort of the underlying protocol for all this. Basically, what we're saying is we no longer need a secret to be told the recipient or the authorizer, right? That's not what we do anymore. We call it proof of possession in the cryptography world, or proof that you know a secret without telling me the secret, which is very, very cool, right? The other thing they accomplished is what we call mutual authentication, which means I know you and you know me, and we validated that we both know each other before we've started exchanging secure information. That's also done cryptographically. It's a simple standard. It's picking up a lot of steam. And if you've seen it in the wild, it was probably called a passkey for you. And that the underlying technology of passkey is FIDO2.
Yeah, Passkeys, the phrase that came around, I don't think I saw it before a year ago, maybe 18 months ago. And now it's everywhere. It's just Passkeys, even like the YubiKeys. When you registered an old passkey, it was a FIDO token.
Right.
When you do it now, it calls it a passkey. So that's definitely the branding that's taken over, which I think is great. And it's great to see passkeys coming into places like Coinbase and Facebook and Outlook.com and all these sites. Google allow you to do passkeys, which is great. So the value of passkeys is all the technical stuff you just said there. I mean, I think the real rub of it is that it bypasses these man-in-the-middle attacks because the authentication flow doesn't run through that web session, right? The other authentications you were doing, the conversation happens in the context of that HTML connection between your endpoint and Microsoft, and you're in the middle listening. With the FIDO2 authentication, the token, the passkey, actually authenticates in a separate channel that is running in parallel so that they can't intercept that.
That's it, exactly. And a big key sort of mechanism they built is that mutual auth. So when you store a passkey, it also stores, the technical term is relying party. But that relying party is the domain. So I have a YubiKey, for example. That YubiKey knows that the credential for Microsoft is for Microsoft.com. So if badguy.com asks for that token, it doesn't have a token for that. It has nothing to do. There's nothing to log into according to FIDO2 and the security key. So the authentication can never finish because the two parties haven't established trust. And that's one of the biggest, at least, geniuses of it is everyone has to know each other before this exchange happens.
Got it. Well, it's back to what is authentication really? It's who you are, what you know, what you have. It's multiple layers of how do we trust each other? And so we're establishing that not only can I sign your authentication request, maybe most passkeys require a PIN number. So it's something I know, it's something I possess, but that thing I possess is also has a connection to the other side. And so there's multiple 2, 3, 4 layers of authentication happening in this process. If you're using physical YubiKeys, the great thing about it is you can't use it without physical access to that key. That physical key is the only way to use that authentication method. Now, usually you're going to put multiple YubiKeys on something you're secured. You want to, maybe have one in your pocket and one in your safe at home. But because of that problem, you lose one, you can't find a way to backfill that. It's gone, right? Now, Microsoft recently added some additional capabilities where we're moving on from just having physical keys to now I can do it through the Microsoft Authenticator app, which is pretty stellar. Right? Is going to allow us to scale this to corporate users, just from personal experience, needing the physical key. I'm a nerd. I believe in this stuff. I value this stuff. It's a pain in my butt. Pulling out that key, it's an extra 10 seconds. I got to pull out my keychain. Now my keychain's on my computer. Forgot to pull it out. There's a lot of insecurities there. And now it's the more secure method. So if I have a very secure site, I don't want to use an app-based one. But the fact that I can now use the Microsoft Authenticator app for this is a huge win for broader adoption of this technology.
Security is only risk management, right? It's a specific discipline of risk management. So you're making risk management sure. You're saying, hey, this privileged thing, I need my hardware security key, and I'm probably combining it with other controls. What happened is the FIDO Alliance, which, by the way, the biggest sponsors of the FIDO Alliance are Google, Microsoft, and Apple. and they all agree on this thing, and they don't agree on much, right? You start to realize like, hey, wait a minute. Not everyone wants to carry and use a security key, and it's tough to get them to work on mobile devices. And like the whole Bluetooth or NFC thing is a challenge. And people cut their fingers, and the biometrics don't work on those keys anymore. All kinds of problems, right? Passkey was actually born out of that. They said, okay, we need to make it more approachable. Nobody wants to use a FIDO2 WebAuthn security authenticator key, and we need to make it simple. And that's where the phone model came in. And it's genius from a technical perspective. It still has a lot of the same properties, physical presence and proximity done through Bluetooth and a lot of cool stuff. But now that the math secret that, my security key knows is now just on my phone. And the math secret is still there. It never goes anywhere, but it's now on my phone and it's communicated over a secure tunnel, or the answer is rather. And that makes life a lot easier because, to your point, I pull out my phone, I give it my fingerprint, and boom, I'm in, barring like weird Bluetooth challenges that they're still working through. But
the interesting thing about Passkeys with Microsoft, you've been playing with Passkeys, using them in other aspects of your life. I use a product like a Keeper or 1Password for managing my personal passwords. And I use Passkeys at places, Google, Apple, Microsoft. I believe in this technology, so I use it to secure my personal things. Well, what's nice is you can start recording these passkeys on your iPhone or in your 1Password or in your Android device or in your Keeper or whatever password manager you use. Most of them now support being the passkey repository, which can be nice. Maybe you can have a passkey to a critical account for your family and your wife can access it too. You shouldn't have to have your phone every time she logs in. She's got access to your shared vault in that product. Microsoft's implemented this a little differently from those implementations in that they only allow the Microsoft Authenticator app to run passkeys. And so they're validating that app, validating how it's configured, and you can't easily share it between multiple devices or have it move across devices. It's very much device bound, which I think is a better security choice from a Microsoft perspective, but is important to keep in mind if you're playing with passkeys. It's a little different in the Microsoft ecosystem.
Well, now they're changing it because Microsoft. I think it's still in preview, but you do have the option to allow syncable passkeys should you choose. And again, it's a risk management decision. Like I use some syncable passkeys for some of my personal accounts, and it's convenient, and I have faith in the encryption and my master password and the underlying authentication of my password manager. So that's a risk management decision if you want synced passkeys, which is what we call it when you put in 1Password. The cool thing about that is, we were just talking about how you need a spare YubiKey. That I have the fancy YubiKey. It's got a bunch of functions. I think the FIDO key is $25. If you double that and you were going to issue these to all your employees, you'd be at $50 a person, depending on your volume and all that. And that's expensive
because people lose them, and you got to ship them to people, and you got the administrative overhead. Like, I can't find my key. Can you get me in? Like, there's some challenges.
Everyone always has their phone, though. Nobody forgets their cell phone. So
you don't even go to the bathroom without it, right? I don't think we know how to poop if we don't have our phone, right?
Right. That's the value of that modality. But I personally like device bound, to your point, for corporate identity.
Well, that's good to know. I learned something new then today. I didn't realize they were putting that in preview. And it does make sense that there's some scenarios where it can be useful to have a syncable passkey. You said, I think there's some administrative controls you may want. I think that's interesting to talk about. So let's talk about a couple other aspects of this. We've actually had FIDO 2.0 authentication in the Windows world for a long time, like 8-9 years with Windows Hello for Business. So talk me through Windows Hello for Business.
That's a fun product because there's multiple lenses to it, right? Maybe tunery for a second. This is all based on cryptography. It's big math. There's more potential numbers in this system than way more than there are stars in the known universe. Like, you can't guess it. But traditionally, like, that came with like certificates. So the thing that gives you the padlock of the website. And if you go all the way back to Windows 8 or 8.1, they introduced virtual smart cards. Literally what we're talking about today is the first sort of infancy of that, and it's evolved since then. Windows Hello for Business has two models, and the cloud model, it is a FIDO key, and they're using the TPM on your computer. And you can do it without, and it's one of the first Intune settings I tell people to get rid of, is you have to have a TPM. It is not safe if you do not have a TPM. It turns the entire laptop or device into a security key. So when I turn on my laptop in the morning, I put in my PIN number, it looks at my face, or however I get in, that is multi-factor authentication. In fact, I wrote a whole article about this, arguing, pulling up the NIST standards, that it is two-factor authentication, because I have physical possession of the device. and I can unlock it with my face or my pen or whatever I use.
Your pen. And your pen is not your password. So it's not something that can
Correct.
be synced to the cloud. It only works locally. It's something you have to know. Yeah, I think Windows Hello for Business is one of those no-brainers if you're moving to, hopefully people are largely moving to Entra ID Join. You're building out Entra ID Join and you're doing Intune. Windows Hello for Business is a no-brainer. And I think it's feels like it's enabled by default in most tenants these days. I don't
you have to go
think
turn it off if you want it.
I think you might be right. It used to be you had to go be on purpose to turn it on, but I think these days I very rarely find it not enabled. Even adds a lot of that security to authentication that needs it. Now, if you're going to do this right, not a lot of users using Edge. Edge does all these things natively. So like Chrome user, there's a plugin that makes this much cleaner and smoother. It passes the compliant device and the FIDO2 data better. But it still is a big win to get Windows Hello for Business deployed. Well, let's talk about like deploying it. What's it look like to get this rolling for a customer in the real world of, hey, I want to lock down my tenant. Like what are your recommendations on that front, Tom?
This is not a peel the Band-Aid moment. Like this is definitely something you stage and you figure out. The first thing is to make those risk management decisions. So my sort of go-to default, particularly in sort of an enterprise single tenant scenario, is privileged accounts have physical security keys. I spend the $50 and I have physical security keys. And that just buys me peace of mind, right? Because I have an admin key to my own tenant. It's in a safe. It's not in my pocket. I can't get it any more secure if I wanted to. That's the first thing. Make a plan, right? Figure out what tranches of users need physical keys. What tranches of users are you okay with device-bound mobile keys? What tranches of users are okay with single passkeys? Maybe that's the thing for your environment. And make that plan and then start to communicate. And I like to roll these things out in sort of waves, right? Who are my white gloves that I really need to make sure are succeeding at this before I move on from them? And then who can I work with through like communications and good training at scale? And you kind of keep going through this process. The other challenge, the minutia of making it mandatory is just a conditional access policy, right? Like this is not hard.
Yeah. Yep.
However, there are quite a few scenarios that just don't support FIDO2 authentication yet for whatever reason. It tends to be older mobile apps. It's definitely legacy desktop apps, but hopefully you have legacy auth already. You've already dealt with that. There's specific browser components that need to exist for this to work. And the weird embedded mobile browser doesn't have it. So you end up falling back to push. So you've got to count for and catch those edge cases. And that's eventually a screen test, right? Whoever opens the ticket, you found that app and you can make a plan. But yeah, stage it, figure it out, make sure you have test users, make sure your white glove users are taken care of. Nobody wants that angry call from the CEO on his way to the board meeting, right? I think you'll be fine. This is not a massive transition. And at this point, there's a very good chance your employees have stumbled on a passkey on their Google account or at the bank, or Robinhood this morning prompted me to set up passkeys. There's all kinds of ways that users are interacting with this as it is.
Well, it's native to your iPhones. Your iPhone's like, hey, I can help you with that. Like, I'm happy to do this for you, right? So it's becoming very common. I liked your tranches idea. I'm with you. Admin accounts should require it. Physical keys are even better. Privileged accounts. We have a number of customers where like they've kind of have tiers. They're frontline workers. They're sticking with the Microsoft Authenticator app, or even they have other layers. I have another customer where they're not enforcing super strong MFA, but those users can only log in from the office IP because they're frontline workers. And if they're not behind that IP, they don't get in. We can do layers of controls. And if one of those accounts gets compromised, they get access to some meaningless email, right? So there's tiers of users. Maybe you have some information workers that just don't do anything interesting or sensitive. And maybe you're comfortable with the Authenticator app while you're rolling this out. You're like, yeah, we're not going to force them into passkeys yet, but my accounting people, my executive team, my legal team, people with access to sensitive data, definitely my administrators, we're going to do tiers of passkey requirement, of FIDO2 requirement, just because they have so much more value to secure them.
And people miss public personas. So if you've got I hate the word influencer, but if you've got an influencer, your CEO is a no-brainer, but you have some leader that's always on stage. We do this at PAX 8, like people that go out and they talk and we hear from them, and there's more training and there's more minutia around keeping the company secure. So you need to think about those personas too. If you have anyone in your space that has authority in the space, that's who I want to impersonate to convince other people to do stuff, right? And that's a powerful vector.
Do you think there's some challenges with the FIDO keys, especially for service providers like MSPs? I think there's a couple things to be aware of. We talked about earlier. This is something a lot of us service providers are wrestling with. We want our customers to be using FIDO keys, but locking out our admin account where we're helping them with things can be hard with the FIDO key, because how do you scale a FIDO key to 10 technicians or 20 technicians on a service desk? And I think there's a couple answers to that. I think one of them is solve the correct problem. Like if you're going to scale support, use something like GDAP, because GDAP allows me to FIDO2 you as employee of my company. I'm going to use Microsoft's partner panel to do your daily work. It's logged who did it. You're not using a shared account. It's fully FIDO2, but you're not sharing a FIDO token on a customer environment. So I think that's the place I'd start with that conversation. If you want to do this at scale, start there. Now, you may still need a full admin account, a global admin, because we all know there's those things you just need to do for the customer. And then you have to start working through, do you have a set number of employees that do have a YubiKey that they're allowed to put on customer tenants, and you build some policy around it? There's a risk on that one too, which is a crazy edge case of, okay, you have a technician, he's got a YubiKey, and it gets set up on 12 customer tenants as a YubiKey on a global admin account. And you fire him and he walks out the door with that YubiKey. That YubiKey is a bit of a golden ticket. And you need to go find all the places that YubiKey was set up on customer accounts. And so I do think it's important that as a service provider, you do put thought into how you're using FIDO keys, YubiKeys at a corporate level, because you can put yourself in a bit of a pickle where it becomes harder to revoke that access.
It's a tough one. And, Microsoft is making measurable improvements to GDAP all the time. I might get beat up for this, but I would postulate that in most scenarios, your tier 1 and probably tier 2 techs where we just find a GDAP. And that's getting better. Build's 2 months away, and there's always more to come at build. It's an interesting problem because, like you said, I do not want to let anyone just willy-nilly YubiKeys onto especially shared global admin accounts. So then do you move away from the shared GA model and somehow automate that disabling of those accounts? And you can, right? You can have unlicensed GAs in Microsoft. That's the thing. So that's an option. This is also, I might get beat up for this too, but this is also an arena where syncable passkeys might have a play. And they might have a play because they are not exportable. They are stuck in the password manager. And if you get into the minutia of NIST and AALs and that sort of thing, they don't qualify. If I turn off your access to my corporate, keeper or whatever, you no longer have access to that passkey. It is impossible for you to have copied that passkey out somehow, assuming I have sharing restrictions set up. There's actually a lot of value in that model, right? And you can combine that with requiring keeper be on a client device and some other controls to really have a somewhat effective strategy. But it is a tough one. And I think if I was scaling again today, I would very much revisit what I was doing and very much be GDAP centric. And there would be a very limited number of humans who get to go around the GDAP wall.
I think you could throw some PIM in there too, of hey, I'm going to FIDO2 in, and then you have the PIM to get your GA. I think there's some real value there of just the pause and the logging and just the approval processor. There's some really interesting things to land there. So I think as service providers, we've got to adapt to the new world. And I think it's a thing, this FIDO2 requirement has been ramping slowly. But I think it's going to get to the point where we're going to have to be able to say well, I don't really want to support you if your admins don't have FIDO2. That becomes a risk for all of us, right?
Password, they never will, but passwords have to go. There will always be a password somewhere. Your network router is going to have a password, right? But passwords are bad. They are not a good measure anymore. They are crackable. Right. They're hard to remember. They're hard to invent. It's just not a great way but it's also so entrenched that it will take decades to not have passwords anymore. But you may as well move forward. And hardware auth or FIDO in general provides you an opportunity to be ahead of the curve, because AITM is, the last digital defense report I saw was 2.5% of attacks, which sounds like a small number until you consider Microsoft's scale. The interesting thing though is the trend is up, right? It was, 1.75 the year before or something like that. So it's an opportunity to be ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. Let's talk about finally, let's wrap it up with just some kind of talking about licensing and requirements. We love our business premium and our E3 and there's so much good there. But to be clear, FIDO2 is available to anybody with a Microsoft account. It's included with Entra ID Basic, the free edition. It's available to everybody. It is important to go into your Entra portal and go upgrade to the modern auth methods. Go to the authentication methods section. Microsoft was going to force everybody to upgrade in September. That day came and went, and people are still not upgraded. There's legacy auth all over the place. I'm not sure why they said one thing and did another, but I'm running in still a lot of tenants where they haven't upgraded. And so first step, if you want to play with this, is you got to go upgrade your authentication methods to modern, enable FIDO2. The default settings are generally okay. Almost anything in there, if you mess with it, is going to make it harder to use FIDO2. There are ways you can really lock it down to just this serial number, or just this model number, or just these devices. And for a sensitive environment, I do that. But if you're just wanting to get your feet wet, go turn on FIDO2. Go get migrated to modern auth. Maybe put one of your accounts and have a backdoor account or a break glass account, but put one of your accounts in a conditional access policy that requires it. Play with it, understand where it impacts you, see what the experience is like. It's still not seamless. There are times that, like you said, that little QR code pop up to trigger it in the Passkey app doesn't work right, or there's a weird delay. I find I have to do it twice at times, that it doesn't take the first time, which is interesting, I think.
Man, I'm glad I'm not alone. Every time the last 2 weeks, it's been 2, and it drives me crazy.
So it's not perfect, and I think that's worth understanding. You need to be using it for yourself now. If you really want to enjoy like the Windows Hello for Business capabilities, start to enforce it with conditional access, you're going to require that Entra ID P1. But we already recommend people are on Business Premium or Microsoft 365 v3. So that's built in and is part of our basic hardening equation. You need to be managing your security with conditional access. Security defaults is great for a startup, but it's not granular enough to really allow you to harden your tenant. So I think it's really worth digging into this, and I think it's kind of fun. It's fun technology to play with.
I'm a cryptography nerd, so that's part of my I love hashing and key pairs, but yeah, it's a cool tech. Also, do it on your personal accounts. Go to your Google account, set up a passkey. Go to your Apple does it, Microsoft personal accounts. Ironically, you can probably do it everywhere except for your bank. You could probably enroll a passkey, and they'll catch up someday when passkeys are obsolete. They'll add passkeys.
Exactly. No, I think it's a great call out. I think doing it on your personal accounts, I think there's an important thing to talk about is not just humans and people taking care of their own security, but intelligent threat actors are going to go after the admins in their personal life too, because they get information. There's additional layers they can go after. And man, if your Gmail account or your Apple account gets compromised, and that's what you're running your life through, that's where all the password resets go, that's where all the notifications go, you're in trouble. They're going to go a long ways. You can do a lot of stuff. Right. And so I'm with you. I have our family Google and Outlook and Apple accounts tied to YubiKeys. And a lot of them now you can say, hey, I'm locking it down to passkey only. Some of them make it harder to eliminate the other options. But, my password vault requires YubiKey. My Apple account, my Gmail account requires it, because I just want to know that's going to be really dang hard to get in there without a couple physical keys. And there's some real peace of mind with that. I think it's critical to get there, and then someday we'll figure out how to get our parents to do the same thing. That's a whole nother discussion.
Well, yeah, we'll get there.
Well, Dom, I appreciate you jumping in and talking with me about this. This is super, super nerdy, and I knew you'd have way more depth of understanding here than I do. To all those listening, get out there, start playing with FIDO2, get some passkeys, set up your Microsoft Authenticator app, really jump in and start to understand it, and start securing your tenants. It's a crazy world out there, and you have to take every advantage you can get. So how can people learn more about you, keep up with some of the stuff you're doing?
LinkedIn is my jam. So it has my government name because it has my validated government ID. So I'm Dominic Kirby on LinkedIn. That's where I nerd out, believe it or not. So yeah, I don't have anywhere else to send you, just LinkedIn.
Perfect. Well, on LinkedIn, you'll find all the different things he participates in. He's being very humble, but he produces some awesome videos through different channels and has great blog posts on his blog. And Dom, you're always giving back to the community. So thank you for all you do, and go check out Dom's stuff. We appreciate you jumping on the show today. And we thank everybody who listened to us today. Thanks for joining us on the Demystifying Microsoft podcast. And we will catch you on the next one.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on Demystifying Microsoft, brought to you by the Sourcepass Center of Excellence for Microsoft. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode. If you would like to talk to one of our Microsoft problem solvers, click on the link in the episode description or contact our team at sourcepassmcoe.com. Thank you.